Hello everyone, welcome to the Media Ecology for Quality of Life annual lecture, 4th edition. This is Paolo Granata. I'm very pleased to be your host for this special event today. I see you are connecting, and so I will spend a few minutes to warm up before getting started with this very special event. We have a few special guests, wonderful talk, and then many other surprises. So for this fourth edition of the Media Ecology for Life Quality annual lecture, promoted, organized, and sponsored by the University of Toronto, University of Bologna. My mistake is because I'm in Toronto right now. I'm a professor at the University of Toronto, and we are running a global event. It's 11 a.m. in Toronto, it's 5 p.m. in Italy, and all across the world. So we are celebrating the world as our classroom in this post-pandemic world. And so I see you are connecting. I wanted to do a little bit of housekeeping before getting started, so you know how to interact with us. And well, we are live streaming on YouTube and Facebook. So feel free to comment on YouTube if you are logged and or on Facebook. So you will be able to share your comments, share your questions. So we want to foster a sense of community, right? Even in this remote setting. So we want you to interact and be engaged with us. And so I see you are connecting, so feel free to share your greetings. Let us know where are you in this moment. Let us know how you are doing, and we will see your comments. Okay, so your comments are very, very welcomed. And so you can comment using Facebook or YouTube comment system. Okay. And so, great. So I'm very, very happy. And I think we can get started introducing our first guest. Because the Media Ecology for Life Quality annual lecture is sponsored by the University of Bologna. Since 2016, we established the University of Bologna has been hosting the Media Ecology annual convention, and since 2016, the University of Bologna established a tradition of hosting an annual lecture for fostering the idea of media ecology for life quality. And today's talk actually is also sponsored by WeTell, Storytelling and Civic Awareness at the University of Bologna. And so I'm very pleased to welcome into our live stream. And so we get ready. I see you are connecting. I'm very pleased to welcome into the live stream Francesco Benozzo of the University of Bologna and Elena Lamberti, University of Bologna, which is also the coordinator of the WeTell research group at Unibo and co-director of the WeTell School on Storytelling and Civic Awareness. So please join me welcome with a virtual round of applause, Elena and Francesco. Hello.
Hello. Hi.
Wonderful to see you. And again, so I feel very excited because I'm in Toronto, you are in Bologna, and I think our students in the WeTell summer school are from all across the world, right, Elena?
Yes, right. They come from Spain, from Croatia, from Lithuania, and of course from Italy, from Brazil. So it's quite an heterogeneous and globalized community, yes, from all around the world.
Excellent. Francesco is a teacher in the WeTell summer school, right?
Yes, I am. I'm not in Bologna at the moment. I am up in the mountains near Modena, and so another part of the world, a very important part actually. And yes, I'm teaching. I'm one of the teaching staff together with our colleagues Francesco Vitucci, Luigi Contadini, so many other persons. Had took part in this great adventure, which is going on since 3 years ago, actually. So we are trying to pose good questions instead of giving stupid answers. And we found out that the best way for trying to understand something of the world around is possibly to pose good questions. At least this is our one of our aims we try to perceive.
Wonderful, wonderful. And not only questions, but also greetings. You see, greetings are coming. This is Paolo Rondelli. Hello, Paolo, from
Paolo,
San
yes.
And so feel free, again, thank you, Paolo, and feel free to share Chiara Rota from I don't know, but good evening. We're probably on the Central European time zone, right? Rightly not in Toronto, because here in Toronto it's a cloudy, rainy day, and it's still 11 a.m. Excellent. Wow. Well, I feel so excited. It's the first time, of course, we are organizing this annual lecture in a remote setting. And so we're taking advantage of putting together different guests from all across the world. And I'm sure you are now curious to see the students. And actually, I think I will be able, if the technology will help, I will be able to bring into the live stream from Zoom. Zoom is our classroom, Zoom, actually, I will say. To bring from Zoom the students. Here they are. And so, welcome. Hello, everyone. Say hi from Bologna and from all across the world. Hello. And so, again, this is true. It's all true. It says we are live and we are connected from everywhere. And of course, so as said, after the special talk today or tonight, we will have a closing ceremony for the We Tell Summer School. Elena Lamberti will tell later a few words. So again, stay tuned, not only for the Julia Creet special talk, but also for the closing ceremony of the We Tell Summer School. All right, so bye. I'll see you later, students. Hello. I'll see you later. Bye. And I think, Elena, we can. I wanted to give you the word for a minute to just explain what is the summer school, why civic awareness, and why we are hosting this media ecology for life quality annual lecture within the scope and the activities of the We Tell Summer School. Over to you.
Thank you. What was one, the summer school is now an all-season school, because of course we're teaching a summer school in November because we had to adjust to the ongoing situation and go online. So it took us a few months to readjust the format. But we're dealing, as you said, with the idea of storytelling and civic awareness, thinking that from the humanities, in collaboration with our sciences and technologies, we can try and help students and us with them to learn more how to be conscious storytellers and how to read and perceive the storytelling that is going on around us, the environmental storytelling that is imposed on us with more awareness. The goal is to foster civic citizenship, actually more active and proactive citizenship, and try to encourage a free will at a time of fake news. So this is what we try to do with this school, which is a part of a bigger project that is has the same name, Storytelling and Civic Awareness, and again, same topic. The group is based at the University of Bologna, and later on we will see other colleagues, whereas the school, the all-season school, is co-sponsored by the University of Valencia as well, and Vilnius University in Lithuania, and we have colleagues from there that you will see later on during these 2 hours. Let me tell you, Paolo, that we are very grateful to you and to the Media Ecology Association for joining venture for this event, because Media Ecology for Life Quality, it's a great thing to share with students who have been spending a month in Bologna in a virtual environment, actually connected from Bologna, to explore many issues related to civic awareness, including the inhabiting complex ecosystem, the role of memory, and storytelling at a time of new cultural traumas, the way language and gender are biased or used and abused. And so because of all these reasons, we're very happy to be part of this new media ecology moment, because as you teach us, and as scholars around the world that teach us the media ecology concerns the media as environment and us as protagonists and not only as passive listeners.
Wow, wonderful, wonderful. I think we are now have a more awareness about the importance of this event, the summer school, the special talk. There are a few greetings. Let me just say hi to Catalina, Buraga, Sarah Mary, Linda, Federica. So we are. I like to say that this is not just an event; it's a community building exercise. Right? We are building a community all across the world, and to foster this sense of community, we have another special guest. Which is the first recipient of the media ecology, media equality is even nicer, but media ecology for life quality, first inaugural lecturer, which is a great Italian journalist, a great Italian storyteller, I will say, to really enlighten the idea of a media for life quality. And so I'm very, very pleased to welcome into this event, and then later he will play a special role for our talk. I'm very, very pleased to welcome Luca DeBiase. Again, first recipient of the Media Ecology for Life Quality. Luca, welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's a great pleasure, and it's always very interesting what you organize.
Thank you very much, Luca. And again, getting ready, because after Julia's talk, you will play a role as a discussant, possibly fostering a Q&A engagement and participation. So I really count on your active participation for fostering a nice discussion. Okay, Luca?
Yes, of course. As Francesco said, it's my core business to ask questions, so I'll ask questions.
Excellent. All right, so I count on you all for a very engaging Q&A session. And just a reminder for our friends on Facebook and YouTube, anytime you can share your questions, you can share your comments, and after the talk, we will be able to take your questions, take your comments, and engage in a discussion. Okay, so feel free anytime from Facebook and YouTube to share your comments. All right, thank you, Elena. Thank you, Francesco, Luca, and from our students and friends on Zoom, it's now time to get started. Okay, so I'll see you later. Thank you. And finally, I'm very, very pleased to introduce our special guest, our special lecturer for today. So the fourth annual lecture on media ecology for life quality. The title is "Who Do You Think You Are? Data, DNA, and New Narratives of the Self." And our special lecturer is Julia Creet, professor of English at York University in Toronto. She's a leading scholar in memory studies since the 90s. Her research projects are broadly interdisciplinary, including the history of Holocaust, literary studies, archival studies, public history, and more recently, data privacy and direct-to-consumer genetics. We will hear more about that. She is the author of the Genealogical Sublime, published in 2020, a book, and also among many other publications. She's the winner of the Jewish Thought and Culture Award from the Canadian Jewish Literary Awards. And she is not only a fine scholar, she is also the director and producer of two documentaries, M.I.M. Mom, A Story of Silence, and data mining the deceased, which is more recent, 2017. And in 2019, Julia Creet received the inaugural York University Research Impact Award for her leadership in public engagement. And so I'm very, very pleased to welcome into the annual lecture for Media Ecology for Life Quality, Julia Creet. Julia, hello.
Hello, everyone. Elena and Paolo, thank you so much for inviting me to do this lecture. I'm truly honored. And although I'd much rather be in Bologna than in gray Toronto, still it's a privilege to be here.
Great, it's a privilege to have you here. And well, it's 11:17, I think, in Toronto. You are in Toronto as well, right, Julia? And then it's 5:17 p.m. in Italy and any time zone. So I think it's time to get started. So, Julia, I'll give you the floor. And we are all ears. We really want to learn from your research and your creative understanding of who do you think we are, data, DNA, and new narratives of the self. Julia, over to you.
Thank you, Paolo. So let me begin with telling you just a little bit about my own story and why did an English professor end up studying direct-to-consumer genealogy or direct-to-consumer genetics. There's a narrative here, of course. So in the late sort of mid-1990s, I went on a very personal journey to figure out why my mother had maintained a complete silence about having been Jewish and having been through Auschwitz. And in the process of uncovering that story, I made my first documentary. Paolo, if you could show the first image, please. So it's called Mum, A Story of Silence. And in the process, making this documentary and doing the research for that very compelling search for family history, took the better part of a decade. I went down a pretty deep rabbit hole. And as I emerged from that process, I looked around me, and it was now the early 2000s. And I thought, well, this is interesting. I've been so passionate about this, about putting together this narrative out of this deep silence, this deep traumatic silence. But I looked around me and I thought, everybody's doing this. I thought my story was so special to me, but I'm part of a zeitgeist. I'm part of a very large social movement focused on family history. Now, this was particularly true of North Americans and North Americans who had European ancestry. When I started to talk about these questions in Europe, particularly in Northern Europe, people were a little baffled about why I would be so interested. So it was a compulsion almost that started in North America, primarily as an effect of migration and also traumatic breaks. So once I started to think about, what's the bigger picture? There was a story that I read that was really influential. And I think that we always have to keep in mind that when we tell stories about ourselves, no matter what kind of material we're using, whether we're using records or family histories, or we're using genetic material, we're creating narratives, useful narratives. And fiction, of course, feeds into those narratives as well. I mean, family history is by and large fiction, by and large rumor and fiction. At any rate, it was a story by Daniel Kish, a Yugoslav writer, and the story was called The Encyclopedia of the Dead. And in his story, there was this fantasy archive in which every detail of every life that had ever been lived was recorded. And the story turned into a bit of a nightmare for the protagonist, in which she discovers the cause of her father's death, which is almost too much knowledge. But in a postscript added to the story several years after its publication, and its republication, in the collected stories of Daniel Kish, he added a postscript, and where he said, you know, this nightmare that I imagined, in fact, is real. And the database that I imagined exists. And it exists in this granite cave outside of Salt Lake City. It's the Mormon Genealogical Archive. Well, that story really sent me down another direction altogether. I thought, okay, so I recognize that I'm part of a much larger growing social consciousness about family history, about genealogy. And here this story is telling me that there's this massive database that I knew nothing about. So it made me wonder if my motivations were purely my own or whether they had been motivated by this larger interest. So I decided to start another project, another documentary project, to investigate the industry itself, the industry of genealogy. Who was collecting the records, why they were collecting them, who was using them, and what would it tell us? What would studying the industry tell us about who did we think we are? So Paolo, could you roll the trailer for the documentary, please? All right, it's while that's coming online. Let me tell you a little bit about the documentary as a whole. So I decided that I would research the largest databases in the world, the most intensively used databases in the world. And so I went, here we go.
There's something in all of us, some innate need to know who we are and why we are who we are. And that leads you immediately to start looking into your past.
It's about selling relationships, and it's about making money out of the ways in which people are related to one another.
We are using genetic tools to make trans-historical truth claims about ancestry and about human history.
My journey into family history began in the mid-1990s, when I was driven to discover the details of a family's secret. By the mid-2000s, after a decade of digging, I realized that this sojourn back into my own past could go on forever. And in that short time, genealogy had become an accelerating online industry and the existential stuff of reality TV. But what does knowing your ancestors really tell you about who you are? And was my enthusiasm for family history truly my own? Is the business of family history really about family? Or are we essentially data mining the deceased?
Thank you, Paolo. So in the process of making this documentary, which has screened worldwide, and I think has been very successful in raising questions about what kinds of narratives we create out of genealogical information. In the process of making the documentary, I first went to I went to Salt Lake City to talk to the executives of the Mormon database. I talked to the founders of Ancestry. Then I went to Iceland, and that Iceland is a very special case because they have the best genealogical records in the world, most complete genealogical records of any nation in the world, and they have the most complete genetic profile of the entire nation. And that was assembled by, and in fact, the genealogy database was paid for by a pharmaceutical research company called Decode Genetics. And the larger history of genetic genealogy, or the larger history of genealogy and its turn towards genetics, has by and large been in the interest of the pharmaceutical industry. And I'll talk a bit more about that later. But Iceland was really the, I call it the canary in the coal mine, because Decode Genetics, and I'm sort of jumping ahead here, but I do tell this story in the documentary, that Decode Genetics was enormously successful in accumulating the DNA of Icelanders who were intensely interested in genealogy. And so for them, the genetic component made them even more excited about the idea that they were all related, and indeed they really are all related because it's such a homogeneous society. But it also made it a very rich database for pharmaceutical research, because you could trace genetically inherited diseases. So Decode was the first company to realize that you could use this very potent database, and this is important. It's a braided database of the genealogical records with the genetic records. Genetic records on their own don't tell you really anything about inherited disease. So you have to have the genealogical information along with the genetic information. And the same is true. Genetics on their own won't tell you much about family history, but the combination of the genealogical records with the genetic records can tell you a great deal. So Decode was really making some quite remarkable discoveries by combining these two databases. But then in 2008, in the crash, Decode Genetics went bankrupt and had to sell the database. So they sold the entire genomic database of Iceland to an American pharmaceutical company called Amgen. And then Amgen hived off half of that database and sold it on to the Chinese. So what started as a benign or a seemingly benign industry now is an industry that is really in the services of all kinds of other interests. So I'll tell you a bit more about that. After I finished data mining the deceased, I thought, well, I have, when you make documentary, you amass way more research than you can ever put into a documentary, again, because of the nature of visual storytelling versus textual. So I decided to expand my research, because I finished it in the documentary in 2016, it was released in 2017, and the industry was growing exponentially. So I decided to continue my research. And in March of this year, I published the Genealogical Sublime. Paolo, would you mind showing the cover? Yes, thank you. This is a book, in spite of its title, and perhaps its title has been a bit of an obstacle, perhaps, for the general reader. But I did write it for a general audience, and it's a book about the databases themselves. So I expanded the research of the documentary. I looked at the longest genealogy in the world. And if I were live, I would ask you who you think that belongs to. If anybody wants to guess, please do. So maybe I'll just leave that question hanging there for a minute. The longest genealogy, the longest recorded genealogy in the world. The biggest database in the world, which belongs to the Mormons. The most lucrative database, which is Ancestry, which was started by Mormon entrepreneurs. The most complete database, which is Iceland, and the most rapidly growing databases, which are the genetic genealogy databases. The answer to whose genealogy is the longest is Confucius. And that in itself is a really interesting story, because it was Confucius's genealogy had been updated. It's 2,500 years old, and it was updated regularly until Mao came along and decided that Confucianism was holding China back. And so Confucius and his genealogy were well, Mao called Confucius a rotting corpse. But in the late 1990s, China decided to revive
We may experience some issues with Julia's internet connection. Well, nowadays we deal with this, and I'm ready to step. I'm stepping in to see whether Julia will be able to be back. And I see that they're still on the way. In the meantime, we knew that could have happened, and I think Julia is coming back because I see. And at a first glance, I will call back Elena and Luca if we can provide at a glance comment on that, because that's the backup plan. But I'm confident Julia will be back. Ellen and Luca at a first glance. So this is the actual research that goes at the deepest nature of our human essence, the human quintessential identity, right? So what's your, at a glance, maybe a question for later? Just share a few thoughts or a question for Julia later.
I was impressed by when she said she wasn't sure it was her need or it was a need imposed on her by what was going on around her, right, about genealogy. Was it only herself that felt the need to do that? And when she discovered that it was a bigger environmental narrative that was taking place there. And then the other thing, which is more market-driven, is the passage from, the database in Iceland up to China via America to create a different narrative of the original data. So these are two interesting issues that I would like her to expand more later on.
All right, so I will save this question or issues for later. Luca, at a glance, feedback on that.
Yeah, of course, the idea of having some roots that explain who you are is a very important one, and it's also a sort of building of a powerful situation in the world. It's always been about power, genealogical approach. Only the Mormons have created this idea of a new ancient people, but the link with genetics, genealogical and genetics, is probably the problem that we face, because it seems to be clear in the research that there is a link between the information that you gather doing your genealogical research and the genetic information that somebody sells to those that want to use it, which I still don't understand if it is good or bad.
That's a good question for discussion. I see Julia is back. Francesco, your very quick at a glance feedback, and then
well, I think it's we are listening something at the very core of our studies. It's among the problem of diffusionism compared to evolutionism, and this idea of a genetic of stories as well is something very important for everyone who is dealing with storytelling. Thank you, Julia.
Great. And so Julia is back. Julia, as you can guess, we've been already warming up and discussing about your insights, your provocations, your thoughts. So we fixed the technical issues. So the floor is again all yours. And so we keep listening to your talk. Thank you.
Thank you so much. My apologies, everyone. Downtown Toronto internet just seems well, my internet is very unstable. So I keep getting sent to breakout rooms. So each chapter of the book tries to address a particular case history that's really about a database. Because my question became, how do we use data? Both archival data and genetic data. How do we use that narratively? And who is profiting? What are the stakeholder interests in amassing these databases, and why are we contributing to these databases? So those were all the kinds of questions that drove my research. So the thing that became very clear to me was that direct-to-consumer genetic genealogy was perhaps the most pernicious version, the most exploitative version of genealogy. I mean, the Mormons had their reasons for accumulating this information. Their reasons were religious. So for the Mormons, it's about a doctrinal imperative to baptize everyone in your family, living and dead. And so they need the genealogical records in order to prove that people have lived, in order to baptize them for the second coming. Now, the Mormons are ecumenical, which means that they will baptize anyone. And in fact, they go into pretty deep hot water for baptizing many Holocaust victims. So the Mormons have collected, to date, about 1/4 of the world's genealogical records. And their goal is to collect all of the genealogical records in the world so that they can baptize everyone who has ever lived. Okay, we're beginning to see the kind of sublime aspects of these databases. And I will, again, towards the end of this talk about this notion of the sublime and how it relates to data, particularly the mathematical sublime. Right now, though, I'd like to, Paolo, if you'll pull up the slide of the cousin tree, which is slide number 4. I just want to I want you to see the extent to which our genetic relatedness declines. So we share half of the DNA of our parents, and that's not necessarily evenly distributed. We share half of the DNA of our brothers and sisters. We share 1/4 with our niece and nephews, half with our children, and then it tails off very quickly. So 1/4 with our aunt and uncle, 12% with our first cousins, 6% with their children, 3% with their children. And as we move historically, as you can see, it halves every generation. So we see this exponential decline in genetic relations. Now, most people can probably trace their family back to at least grandfather, great-grandfather. So genetic information isn't going to tell you unless you're adopted. And lots of people use genetic genealogy to try and discover their biological parents. But the idea of genetic genealogy is that it really pits the notion of a social family against a biological family, and it elevates these biological connections. But as you can see, they tail off very quickly. So your third cousin, you share less than 1% of your DNA with your third cousin. Now, keep in mind that we share 99.9% of our DNA with everyone. Paolo, you can take this slide down. Thank you. So we're talking about a 0.1% that then gets hived off into smaller and smaller and smaller amounts. So already we're in the realm of the mathematical sublime. And Kant's notion of the mathematical sublime is very useful to us. The idea that numbers rapidly expand beyond our ability to comprehend them. Now, when we think about genetic genetic composition, in particular our own genetic composition, we're talking about material that we cannot perceive by the naked eye. I mean, we can see genetic similarities, but we cannot see our own molecular structure. So we're asked to then make that leap from a mathematical or a scientific idea and turn it into a narrative one. And in the process, I think we often have to set aside this notion that these are tiny, tiny, tiny differences between us. And in fact, what we do is we amplify those differences for narrative purposes. Now I'd like to look at a recent Ancestry ad. Again, Paolo, if you could bring up this the Ancestry website. I think Ancestry has the most has had the most successful, without question, has had the most successful promotional strategy for genealogy in general, and now, of course, genetic genealogy. And Ancestry's question, and the question of the popular television series, Who Do You Think You Are?, which is syndicated around the world, poses what I think of as a pernicious question. This question of who do you think you are? It's a question that is, as we know from all desire, that implies a sense of lack. That you cannot know who do you think you are? You must be mistaken in some way. That you have to buy information about yourself in order to prove who you think you are, or in order to solidify who you think you are. So the question is an existential question that is posed as a commercial question. So we can answer these existential problems by buying data, and that's what we're buying. We think of it as records, or we think of it as genetic information, but we are buying data about ourselves. That is, that we have generated, that has been generated for us by institution. A lot of it is institutional data. When we think about documents, marriage certificates, birth certificates, death certificates, all of that kind of institutional information about us and our parents and our grandparents, immigration records, all kinds of data that really doesn't belong to us, but is about us. And that's really what the industry is about, the archival industry, at any rate. The direct-to-consumer genetic part of it takes a different tact entirely, and yet plays with exactly the same question: who do you think you are? So if we look at this ad, the first thing we see is this young couple of mixed race. Race plays a really important role in genetic genealogy. First of all, the dominant users of genetic databases are white, because they're primarily clustered in North America, and really sort of eastern seaboard. North America is the most intense users, and in the Nordic countries and Western Europe. So that's where the majority of people who have submitted their DNA to these databases live, and the majority of people in those areas are of some kind of Caucasian or white extraction, or Northern European extraction. So it's really interesting that this ad, we see what look like sort of two mixed race people gazing towards heaven, because we're dealing again with a kind of metaphysical question: who do you think you are? That you can buy an answer to. All right, Paolo, if you could just scroll down a bit. Right, if you'll stop there. Okay, so here's the question: Nigerian, Sicilian, what are you? Just stop there for a sec. This is a really interesting shift from who are you to what are you? And it suggests that the existential question has really, in some ways, been replaced by a material question. And that's the question of your genetic composition. So somehow that is a measurable combination. You know, if we can determine our precise genetic makeup, then that materiality will tell us definitively, scientifically, what we are. And from there, we'll derive the answer to who we are. Now, the history of eugenics, this question of genetic makeup, has historically, I mean, it's a 20th century invention, and historically in the 20th century has been a very, very dangerous idea that we can determine who belongs where by genetic ancestry. Of course, it's, you know, we look towards the Nazis for the development of this idea, and indeed, it's the racial component of this genetic categorization of what we are is never far from the discussion. So, what are you? And that's that poses the supposition that this is indisputable, what you are. But all of these databases are proprietary databases. So what that means is that the database is only as good as the people who have contributed their DNA. So the databases measure your DNA against the DNA that they already have on file. Now, Ancestry, every 5 years or so, updates its genetic profile of you. So who you were 5 years ago, according to the database, changes because the database changes. Now, the last time they did it, customers, were really disconcerted. Well, how could I have been this genetic mix 5 years ago, and now all of a sudden you're telling me I'm a completely different percentage of this, and that's dropped out, and how do I make sense of that? So when Ancestry updated those genetic profiles, people were really quite disconcerted by the idea that what they had held as scientific certainty shifted. And it shifted again because the databases were growing exponentially. And so the sample against which everyone's DNA had been measured had changed. So these are not scientific stable answers to the questions of, you know, what are you? We're all mongrels. We're all mongrels. But that answer won't sell genetic tests. So if you can scroll down just a little more, Paolo, and we'll look at these testimonials at the bottom. Connect with your people. Actually, just stop here for a sec. This idea of connecting with your people. So genealogy and genetic genealogy, even more so, is a process of inclusion, but also exclusion. You have to be able to say, I belong to this group, and this, you know, all of these other people don't, in order to make yourself feel like you have an identity. Identity is this very paradoxical notion of inclusion that's based on exclusion. Now, genetic identity has this interesting quality of having, well, these very small percentages. So you can identify with really whatever part of your genetic identity you feel most compelled by narratively. So here, you know, a serious ethnic mix. Australian Ali Clementia thought that she knew her ethnic background, but her DNA results revealed so much more with some exotic surprises. Okay, let's think about this notion of exotic surprises for a moment. What does that mean? She looks completely white, doesn't she? But the idea of a DNA test is that it might reveal that you have, a 2% indigenous bloodline in you. It's nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. But what it does is it gives people, and one of the people I interviewed when I was doing the documentary was the head of the New England Historical Genealogical Society. And this is the oldest genealogical society in North America. And he said that he had just done his DNA test, and he had, in fact, a 2% Asian marker, which is how the indigenous bloodlines show up in North America. And I said to him, but 2%, that doesn't, that means nothing. And he said, oh, no, it does. It confirms that somewhere in, rumored in our family history, there was an indigenous ancestor. And it means that I'm connected to the land. Oh, I thought, oh my goodness. Politically, this is like Elizabeth Warren's problem of claiming, indigenous ancestry. Politically, what it means for settler, as we understand it in North America, for settler colonialists to say, I'm 2% indigenous, that somehow I'm connected to the land, that somehow I belong here, is a politically disastrous story that allows us somehow to get out of this problem of migration, of colonization. So these ethnic mixes have, what part of them we claim have pretty profound political and, again, narrative contributions. So redefining a sense of self. Mark Carter believed that he was 100% British. Nobody is 100% anything. It's impossible. It's a genetic impossibility. We have all migrated from somewhere. So the notion that we're 100% anything to begin with is a kind of racist ideology that we have to be very, very careful about. Connected beyond Columbia, again, this idea, these unexpected results, that somehow the materiality of what we are will determine our cultural association. Without any kind of cultural association or affiliation at all, that blood or genetics will allow us to belong somewhere. Thank you, Paolo, for that slide. So, and I must be running out of time. Let's just look then at the last slide, which is an advertisement. This is called Legacy Family Tree, and it's an advertisement for software. And I want you to see in this slide this connection between the the mathematical formulation. This is a family tree that lifts up to heaven. That we will, this, to my mind, this image I think incorporates all of the sublime aspects of genealogy and genetic genealogy in particular, that somehow these mathematical, and this is such a mathematically clean family tree. No family tree looks like that to begin with. It's all about the self. The brightest light ends up down at the bottom in some sort of bucolic place where you are the one, where all of your ancestors have concentrated their genetic contributions into you, and it reaches upwards into heaven. So this is a spiritual exercise that has been commodified. I mean, our need for connectivity is without question a spiritual exercise that's been commodified as a genetic, as a scientific, as a qualitative or a quantitative, sorry, that's been quantified. So how do we bring these things together? Well, obviously we do it narratively. So we take this quantifiable information and we turn it into a story, a usable story. So what I would like to leave with is the idea that these databases are growing exponentially, yet, and we become, as the databases grow, we become smaller and smaller data points in this massive accumulation of both genetic data and documentary data, and that we use the information that, again, isn't particular to us. Millions of people are contributing to and drawing from these databases, and yet the narratives that we take from that data are manifestly individual, or they don't work for us. So we have to deal with that paradox, and it is a sublime paradox of the exponential growth of data and the importance that we're placing on that data for individual narratives. And I will stop there.
Thank you very much, Julia. Thank you. Wonderful, absolutely fascinating and concerning to some extent, and it's great to really focus on, to some extent, the catchphrase of our contemporary media ecology. So we are data, right? So the idea that datification of our identity. And so I'm sure our discussant Luca will have many thoughts to respond and to open up the floor to conversation. So Luca, I'll bring you into the discussion. So I'll give you the floor for your response, your feedback, and then I encourage all people and folks on Facebook and YouTube, please share your thoughts, share your questions. So we're very, very happy to take your question, take your thoughts and comments to let you come in to the discussion. So feel free to use the Facebook chat or the YouTube live chat as well for sharing your questions or thoughts. And same our students on Zoom. So feel free to use the chat. I will take your questions as well. So Luca, your at a glance feedback on Julia's talk.
Well, it's much more interesting to ask questions than give a feedback, but just to frame this, I think we are in the middle of an age in which we transform narratives in data collection, not only in the genealogical field, but in many other fields. For example, friendship has become a narrative for gathering data for Facebook. And there are so many other big narratives that seem to be what they are, but in fact, they also are data collection. And there is a debate about what is data and who owns data. Because if the question of the genealogical people is who do you think you are, or who I would like to know about who I am, or something like that, underlying this kind of question, there should be the question of who owns the data that are you.
Yep.
I am data, but who owns my data? Who owns me? And one idea about who owns the data is the platform that gathers the data, and the platforms that has the computer on which the data is recorded. One other idea is, which I like very much to know what can be the take from you guys, is the idea that data are copyright. It's my property, and I give my intellectual property in exchange of a service, but the property stays mine. My life is my work of art, let's say, and so it's what I write on the computer that I use is my copyright, and I will never lose the control. In theory, I will never lose the ownership of that. If that was true, then we could also fight a battle against the use of data gathered for the sake of genealogically build and to have a strong way to counter the idea of platforms taking my data out of me and thus taking my life out of me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a really interesting sort of hypothetical, Luca, that we might own our data and particularly our genetic information, but that's not what's happening. Some people have argued that some privacy people have argued that the strongest route actually to genetic privacy would be for everyone's DNA information to be available. That it would be much more difficult to discriminate in some ways. But the question of ownership of data, when you submit your DNA sample to one of these companies, they're getting a bit better about the privacy piece of it, but it's exactly the same as Facebook. It's exactly the same. They take proprietary ownership of that data. Yeah, you still own your DNA, but they can do anything they want with it. And by and large, what they do is they sell it on. Now, you have to, there's some permission controls. The permission controls have gotten a bit better. But for example, if you have an account on Ancestry, you can't extract your information. You can't extract your DNA. You can't even close the account. Even if you die, the account isn't closed. So once you have contributed your DNA, there's no possibility that you can retain any kind of proprietary ownership over it. And that's really the problem, is that once they sell your data on, okay, it's de-identified, but it can be re-identified. But the privacy provisions of the original database don't apply to the secondary sales. And so there's a huge combined problem of ownership and privacy, and they go hand in hand. And no one has really come up with a solution to that. But everybody who works in this area agrees that what you give away when you buy a DNA test is much more valuable than the information that you get back. So if we were to put a price on what it means to give someone our DNA, it would certainly be more than $69.
Yeah. Well, in a couple of days, the European Commission will show up their proposal for a completely new regulation of platforms and digital services. As you know, Europe is quite aware of the data economy problem. And one thing that it seems that they will do is to allow platforms to do what they want, but ask for the strict compliance with guidelines. And on top of that, to let authorities access data in order to monitor the way they will comply the guidelines. So this is going to be a big debate between the two parts of the Atlantic. And as we are more ancestors to you than you to us, it could be a bit of a strange debate.
It's a really interesting debate because the GDPR privacy regulations have seriously affected the genealogy industry in North America, and they really kick about it. So yeah, it'll be fascinating to see how that plays out.
Yeah.
Julia, in this regard, actually, there is a question from Juanio on YouTube. Are there exchanges of information between these data collection companies and the governments of different countries? If yes, to what end? So it's a very specific question, but I think it goes to the point of the balance between public authorities dealing with business models based on data information. So what's your take on this relationship?
It's a really
for your question.
Yeah, it's a good question. The clearest example that we have is the unintended consequences of genetic genealogy in the States, which has been to use those databases for law enforcement. So in the U.S., there's and this matters because genealogical information isn't contained nationally, right? The whole point is that it circulates worldwide. That people want information from other countries. That these databases amass. I mean, the Mormon databases amassed information from all over the world. But what happened in the U.S. was that people uploaded their genetic information to a public database called GEDmatch, which allowed them to get more genetic matches, because more genetic, to increase their genetic family, because it got around the privacy provisions of private companies. And then the police discovered that they could use that database to start tracking cold killers or cold cases. So this started in early May 2018. The first case was announced. Since then, there have been several hundred cases, cold cases, that have been solved using these genetic genealogy databases. Now, it's a huge problem because on the one hand, we want to say it's a greater good to have these cold cases solved, and it brings so much relief to the families, and it takes terrible monsters, puts them in prison, all of that. But the other side to it is that this is genetic surveillance, and law enforcement, and there are no rules against it. The rules against law enforcement use of these databases are only put in place by the databases themselves. So the problem is it's entirely unregulated. It's more regulated in Europe than it is in North America. And we also know that governments are starting to use these databases for border surveillance as well. So if people are claiming to immigrate for family purposes, they're now being asked to submit DNA samples. And those will be compared to their family members in the country. So governments will increasingly use this information if people give it up in a kind of public access way.
Great. And we have another question, actually many questions from the chat for you, Julia. And I will start with Michela Bonato. Thank you very much for the presentation. After many years of research, do you have insights on who are the customers, and is there a pattern that you could trace? So thank you, Michaela, for the question. And Julia, what's your take on customers?
Yeah, so there are discrete groups of customers, really. They tend towards older, sort of the supposition always was that it was sort of retirees who had time to do this kind of research. So generally consumers tend to be a bit older, but the genetic tests have shifted that a lot. Often groups that have experienced some kind of traumatic historical break. So, for instance, Jewish users constitute a very discrete and quite large group. African Americans have their own database, and often databases, particularly documentary database or databases of documents, will be targeted towards particular cultural groups. The adoptees, anybody who has some kind of question about their biological inheritance, those tend to be a kind of discrete group of users as well. And then there are just people who they become obsessed. and those kinds of users tend to be white, middle class. They're not so invested for sort of traumatic reasons, but much more for the sort of questions of research, of the sheer excitement of doing historical research. And I think that's really that's been the driving force of the industry, are people who realized once the internet, once these databases were put online, that they could spend hours and hours and hours of doing research. And we all know how exciting it is to do research. So it's, I've met all kinds of people who do it. But I would say that those are the kind of discrete groups, the sort of traumatic histories, be they biological or historical, and then the people who just really need something to occupy their brains and the thrill of the search.
Great, Julia. And I was going to take another comment from YouTube. We have a few, actually. If someone gathered that they are 2% something and grew their children as belonging to that other ethnic group, how could we blame these children if they felt as belonging to that group? So I think the question is how the information actually affects the construction of our habits in terms of identity. What's your take, Julia?
Well, I would say that there's no blame. I mean, I would think that the way someone is raised, and that's what we call social family versus biological family, I would say that experience of being raised as belonging to a cultural group is much more important than whatever genetic percentage an ethnic test shows. And that's the problem with these genetic tests, is that they undermine our social experience. They undermine the things that we grew up with. Why would we exclude somebody from a group based on a genetic test? That's the problem. If they've grown up in that group, if they've had the experience of that group, if they identify with that group, then that to me is the much more powerful and salient experience. So there's no blame there. The problem is the genetic test. It's not the experience, and it's not a parental decision to say, well, this is our cultural milieu. There's no blame. that's the problem of these tests, is that they pretend to prove that you are something other than what your experience has been.
Right. And there is a kind of historical representation of the macro families. There is a comment on that, Claudio Boyer, wondering about the historical criteria for the ethnic macro regions users are assigned to. They seem to be analytically weird, like wanting to use both the pre and postmodern nation state paradigm. So we still have some kind of biased categories. So what's your take on that, Julia?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's absolutely true. So the way these genetic tests work is, and particularly in terms of migration or ancestral, percentages, is that they're using data that is thousands of years, genetic tracing that's thousands, tens of thousands of years old. And then they're imposing contemporary nation states on that data. So if you get a test back that says that, you're 30% Irish, for example, but the data, the genetic data that they've used to determine that is based on migrational patterns. And again, these are all mathematical formulations. They're all mathematical models of mutation rates, and migration patterns. So there's good science behind it. I'm not saying that the science is inaccurate, but what's inaccurate is the way in which they impose these modern day political nation states on data that's much, much, much older than these contemporary formations. So that's when you begin to see the kind of political formation or the political constraints of this information. So, somebody who says, well, I thought I was 100% British. Well, there is no 100% British. I mean, migration information will tell you, again, that there were all kinds of migrations in and out of Western Europe, that nobody is 100% anything. But this notion of the nation state is so dominant in our understanding of, well, I want to be Italian, or I want to be Norwegian, or I want to be this, or I want to be a Viking. That imaginative, that terrible combination, I think, of imagination and nation is both it's both supported and undermined by the genetic data. It's a great question.
Wonderful. And there's another question on the economic implications of the data management, which is from Laura. Laura Bat is asking, how will insurance companies use this data in the future? Will nations safeguard their citizens? Will big companies refrain for taking advantage of these data? So I think it's we have many others. So it's probably the second last one or the last one question. Well, so your take, Julia.
That is the question that worries everyone, and I think it's a legitimate thing to be worried about. To go back to the question of law enforcement accessing these databases, we know now that there are completely unintended consequences of having this data in the hands of private companies. That who accesses the data is only as good as the company's privacy regulations and whatever government oversight there is. But there's really very little government oversight at the moment. Now, in Canada, we have something called the Genetic Non-Discrimination Act, which says that you can't be discriminated against. An insurance company can't discriminate against you. A school, you can't be housing, you can't be discriminated against on the basis of genetic inheritance. But if you take one of these tests and it says that you have, because Ancestry or 23andMe and now Ancestry as well, they have the ancestral test, but then they also have the health information test. So, have you inherited a greater likelihood of heart disease, for example. So you take one of these tests, and it shows that you have a very elevated risk of hypertension or heart disease. And now, mind you, we all know that these are environmentally influenced, as much environment as genetic, but that's a separate question. But if you take one of these tests, and then an insurance company comes along and says, well, do you know if you have any pre-existing conditions? And you say no, and then you have a heart attack, and the company says, but wait a minute, you took one of these tests. There's a possibility that the genetic information that you know about yourself can be used against you. Right now, the insurance companies, as much as they'd like to get their hands on this information, have no direct access to these databases. But I don't know how long that will hold. So that's a two-part problem. You can't unknow genetic information once you know it.
Right. And I think there is time for a final question. Is from our professors in the Whittle School, Paolo Rondelli, Iceland, which is, I think, did some practice on that, and how difficult it is to manage data and their protection to avoid misuses. And from Paolo Rondelli.
Well, the problem with the Iceland database wasn't sort of Iceland's use of it. It was selling the data on. And so whatever privacy protections Iceland had in place, when they sold the data on, they had to rely on the goodwill of the American company that bought it, Amgen. And then when Amgen sold it on to China, and this is really the problem, is that we know that China is using, and all of these, the reason that they're interested in these databases, again, is not to isolate particular individuals, but for China's purposes, and for Amgen and for Iceland, it's about pharmaceutical research. But on the other hand, we know that China has discriminated against the Uyghurs, for example, on the basis of genetic identity. So it's the potential misuses, and one of the, I hate to say this, but I think one of the worst potential misuses of this information is for both migration and belonging to nation states. So, for example, Israel floated the idea of genetic testing to see whether or not people were eligible to make aliyah. Were you genetically Jewish enough? Now, there is no genetic marker for being Jewish. So it's a question of the genealogical information with the genetic information. So the issue is, and a country like Iceland, where genetic homogeneity is so important, the question is, will nation states start to determine, is it possible that we might go in the opposite direction, where nation states start to ask for genetic information in order to determine some kind of citizenship? It's a possibility.
Wow, great. And I was wondering if Luca, would you like to share some final remarks, maybe a final question or final remarks, Luca?
Yeah, the final question is, I may have missed this information, but I don't think it was shared or discussed enough. Is there a concentration of platforms that gather this kind of information? I mean, in terms of, we used to think that in digital platforms there is an organic tendency to concentration. So the big power goes to big companies. Is this happening also here?
Absolutely, yeah. So the three biggest companies in the world are Ancestry. Ancestry has more genetic information than any other country, and more genetic information than most governments, actually. The second one is 23andMe. So those are both American-based companies. And then there's MyHeritage, which is an Israeli company. Those are the biggest. Those are the biggest companies. And again, these databases, because they're proprietary, are only as good as the size of the database. And so each one has to advertise, we are the biggest, we are the best, our results are the most accurate, because they need to entice people to give them information. And lots of people test with more than one company to compare the results. Also, the companies, they're doing all of this outreach towards non-Caucasian users, because they need to expand the databases. So the biggest ones are in North America, and they'll just continue to grow, because those are the ones that promise the best results, because they're already the biggest.
Okay.
Thank you, Luca. Thank you, Julia. So we are really fascinated by your research, and I think your talk today, tonight, or this morning, depending on where you are, really enlightened the idea of fostering civic awareness, and being digital citizens probably means being more aware of this, the implications of this new forms of identity in the digital age. So thank you very much.
Thank you, my pleasure.
I think it's a virtual round of applause for Julia. Thank you, Luca, for being our discussant. I'll take back Elena and Francesco to share their greetings and applauding to Julia. Thank you very much. And let's keep fostering our global civic awareness in the 21st century. Thank you, Julia. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Paolo and Julia and everybody.
Thank you, Luca. Thank you, Julia. Bye. Okay, and finally, here we are. It's 12:28, so perfect timing. It's 6:30 in Bologna, and all across the world, we are getting ready for celebrating in our students in the We Tell Summer School, 4-season school, and I see Elena is getting ready for that. So, if the technology will assist us, I'll try to bring the students from Zoom into our. Let's see what happens now. Elena, here they are. Okay, so Elena, what's going on right now? So this is the final ceremony, final event for the We Tell Summer School, right?
Yeah, it's the first time we do something like this online, so we are experimenting, and but it's what we have done so far in the last month. Am I wrong, Francesco? Because we start with a little surprise for our students.
Yeah.
Francesco.
Yeah, because we have to thank, first of all, our tirocinanti, our interns, who worked a lot before the school, during this month, and they also prepared a special present for our students before the ceremony. I'd like to recall their names: Federica Fontanesi, Sofia Mischi, Chiara Donata Rota, Nicoletta Catalina Buraga, and Linda Ruscello. Thank you again for your huge work with students, and for us it wouldn't have been possible to release this school without you, and you know very well. And what did they do? They released more than realized. They released a small video, which is a kind of a summing up of what happened this month, which was an extraordinary experience for us, because step by step we suddenly realized that you students were all in your houses, in your places, different time, different spaces, but as we see you on this computer, you actually were able to create a community, and also small communities inside the community, small rivers inside this big river. We are very proud of you and of your research that you have presented last Friday. I've already said that on behalf of the teaching team, we really are very proud of your works. And as I said before, we just posed some questions, but maybe you gave us a few answers to start up with new questions. So thank you again. And now we are going to see all together this little present that our interns realized and released for you. Thank you again. See you soon.
And so I guess that, it's interesting what we have.
The dark side and the white one.
Something else with this. So to introduce after a while the unexpected, because otherwise they say, oh yeah, okay, the word, and then you don't.
As,
Yes.
I don't know, a kind of metaphor, let's say.
That's cool.
Because we act always or mostly looking at our past.
Accepting new inputs in economy and also ancient for our past.
So this really reflects on their culture. The second word is diversity.
It could be traditional, diversified, and open-minded.
Welcoming, and it's known for their hospitality. Just thinking about tourism.
This scent is itself mainstream.
I mean, we also have examples of, I don't know, people hashtagging things that were important and changed lives of people,
but if I can interrupt you, at the same time, if you wish to change something or wait.
In a sense of showing yourself as part of it without.
I think, oh my God, so many people die in the continent.
Great novel.
To our dictatorship, and for those people who don't know, like, it's only ended in 1975.
Yeah, I have this idea of zombie disease when I think about a brown tumor eating flesh.
Yes, so we are showing in all directions. And actually, I don't have the right answer because I have no clue.
Aha. Well, let me tell you, for Lithuanians, it was not that easy at all. We don't have articles.
The Croatian also doesn't have any articles, but we also have male, feminine, and neutral gender.
So what they did actually was just use them with capital letters. They didn't use an article.
Yes,
so they ungenderized somehow the names.
And yes, scientific careers or most honorable careers are all masculine, and more artistic jobs or careers are all feminine.
Perfect. This is the mistake. This is the mistake that the communication team of UNESCO did a few days ago. In fact,
about cliches, we could say that he's dressed like a woman, of course, because they got such a nice kind of pair of shoes.
And translation play a special role in the articulation of cultural concepts such as femininity, masculinity, race, and otherness.
I think that as far linguistic goes right now, or contemporary linguistic goes, I believe it's pretty much given that the language shapes thought in ways we can understand and study and analyze.
In some cases, we rewrite, we deconstruct, we are like bricoleur.
Okay, it's easy, but just to pretend to. Okay, mascot. Wonderful, wonderful. Round of applause. So yeah. Keep. I think Marco from Zoom can join us, if I'm not wrong. Marco, are you there? Or anyone else from Zoom? Marco, Paolo, Marco?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, here you are. Okay, so what's going on there, actually? So I hope you were able to enjoy Julia Creet's lecture, and so what's your feelings there?
We enjoyed the lecture, and we enjoyed this very complex virtual space in which you put us. So thanks for this experience of being all together in different screens everywhere. That was amazing. Thanks. So it was a really 3/4 dimensional experience, I'd say. And we are now about to introduce our students and to name them as alumni of the Whittle Summer, Not So Summer School. And I guess Brigitte wanted to kick off this part of the final event. Am I wrong? Are you there, Brigitte?
I'm here. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you for all the interns. As you notice, I've changed my place today, where it's kind of funny to see, how Francesco me just say, "Are you there? You Zoom people." Thank you, Francesco. So I will start introducing. Well, no, it's interesting how where we are. But I will not take off on these thoughts. I will keep them for the future. But I guess I have the honor to start introducing the first students, and then I will hand over to Paolo, and he will keep on going. I will introduce Fendi Friedel from Croatia, who has been here with us. Wonderful inputs. Also, Nina or Isabel Beltran Manuel from Spain, and Juanjo Monche Corts. He's also from Spain. It has been a great pleasure to be with you and with all of you. And I hope our paths will cross again soon. And I will hand over to Paolo. I don't know if Paolo is there or keep.
Yes, I'm here, and I'm
Wonderful.
here. Thank you.
Quiet. I will silence myself.
Okay, so I'm here and taking the floor. Maybe I have to run away because I'm here in my office, and today the alarm went off. So we have a new system, and they will activate from remote, and I have 3 more minutes before the alarm will start. So I introduced before leaving all this wonderful ceremony. First of all, Emily Bandeira from Brazil, Laura Abate from Italy, and Aitana Garcia Juste from Spain. 3 wonderful girls like rest of the class. Thank you for this wonderful experience with us. It has been great to be part of this panel of experts, and I wish you all the best, and hopefully we will cross our paths soon somewhere on a platform on the web or face by face in somewhere really academic or non-academic. All the best to you. So next one in the list is, I don't know who of my colleagues. Who wants to take the floor?
I'm taking the floor.
Marco.
Here I am again. I forgot to say that I am really thankful to our interns and the wonderful work they did before. So sorry, guys, I love you. Thanks for all your help. And let's go on with our students, now alumni of the Whittle School. Bianca Belli from Italy, Michela Bonato from Italy. I'm going in the 8 banal alphabetical order. Sorry about that. But again, Chiara Filippeschi, congratulations. Congratulations to you all. And we have, I hope I will not forget anybody, Maria Grazia Manduzio, Erika Mazzoli, and Jacopo Norcini Pala. Congratulations to you all, guys. It's been an honor and a great pleasure to be here with you during this school. And I really enjoyed my time teaching and learning from all of you. And now for the last round of students' introduction, I leave the floor to Luigi, to our the last member of the teaching team that is here with us today to introduce our students and thank them all for everything they did with us this month.
Yes, I introduced the rest of the students. Martina Mileto from Italy, Francesca Poluzzi from Italy, Baiva Statkaitite from Lithuania, Cristina Viola from Italy, Isabella Parutto from Italy. Thanks and greetings, and I hope that these days with us will be useful for your future. Thank you.
But now, we'd love to hear something from the student themselves. If they want to say a couple of words, just if they even just want to say bye. Does someone want to say something? Come on, don't be shy. I know you're live on YouTube. That may sound intimidating, but you should not,
My neighbor stopped remodeling, so I'm jumping in to send my
great
hammering. So my greetings to you for finishing this wonderful school. You were all amazing. May you be motivated and moved, passionate and powerful, determined and driven as you embark upon your new adventures and new stories in your bright, I'm sure of that, future.
Well, thanks, Curtita. If there are no further comments
Well, maybe if I can start and break the ice.
Of course, we love icebreakers.
It was great meeting you. The teaching stuff, really incredible, very opened a new perspective. And I wrote a few words, but they are like brainstorming. I wrote here challenging. This experience was motivating, stimulating, and left us with open questions and open minds. If I can thank you with these words.
I can go next. Yes. I actually didn't write anything, but I'm just going to improvise. It was, above all, such an enlightening experience. I'm so grateful for being able to know new people and then receive lectures from such amazing lecturers. As Erica said, I think, you taught us about so many different aspects, some of them which I would have never gone into that deep. And as she mentioned also, it leaves you thirsty for more. So it's been 1 month. It's been a weird experience with Zoom, and which I'd never done before until coronavirus. And you've made the lack of the face-to-face class, you've made it up for us through your engagements with the students and the continuity and how you've been there all days, 24/7 for us. So thank you very much.
May I follow you? I'm always interrupted during the summer school, but it's not happening now. So I wanted to thank you all because this experience was my first online class where I could keep my camera on and where people encouraged me to talk instead of just, staring at the screen. So I really missed the feeling of actually participating during the lesson, and I really appreciated what you did for us. I think the things I've learned will be useful for my everyday life, but also in my academic background, because now when I read a text or when I read a story or I hear about how a story is told, I have a totally different perspective. So thank you all again.
Can I go next? First of all, I want to thank you, everyone involved in the project, the lecturers, the interns, and also my school colleagues that gave this experience and that permits to this experience to become really fruitful and challenging and interactive. And this experience have taught me to dig deeper, not only in the topics of the school, but also in other aspects of everyday life and in my way of reasoning. So thank you all very much. I would just like to thank to all the professors and lecturers because of their really friendly approach, which I appreciated. And this is one experience I will cherish for the rest of the time because I really enjoyed it and learned a lot of new stuff.
So I would also like to express my gratitude because it was such an enriching experience, but also challenging. And I feel so much gratitude for all my fellow students as well as for our teaching team. Sorry for my voice, I'm a bit nervous to talk, but yeah, the whole month went by so fast. I was looking forward to every lecture, even though I couldn't attend every seminar, but I looked at every recording, and just hearing all of your stories, all your voices, it was so exciting. And just thank you so much.
Thank you all so much for everything, the patience, the talks, the chats, the questions, the lectures. Like Viva, I also was pretty excited to watch basically every lecture. And I also got very happy that this was a Zoom class, that it actually worked. This is the first time that I see it happening. Thanks so much. I'm sure lots of things will happen from all of the heads that were inside this class during this last month. Hope we see somehow, sometimes in time and space again. Thank you.
If I may go next, I just wanted to thank everyone, professors, and of course, and most of foremost, my traveling companions here, my company, and I'm very glad to have the opportunity to play a role in this experience and to understand better what it means to explore a topic so complex such as civic awareness, and what does it mean for us? What does it mean for us in so many different angles? And I'm really grateful, and I hope I can see you all soon enough in real life.
Yeah. Sorry.
Sorry, Juanjo, go.
Yeah, are you sure? Okay. Now, I just want to thank you all, both teachers and students, because I have learned a lot from you. Not only concepts, but also ways of thinking that I think is really important in these times that we are living. So yeah, I really enjoyed this experience. I wish I could experience it in Bologna, but the times that we are living are quite difficult. But it has been really interesting. It was my first experience on Zoom, and I thought as I was with all you in the same classroom. So thank you for all.
Yeah, I also wanted to thank everyone. Sorry for my camera, it doesn't work, so I can't show my face, but thank you to the teaching team, to interns, fellow students, especially because it was my first teaching experience on Zoom since I graduated in the pandemic, but I didn't have classes, and it was my first time, and I had a lot of doubts. But it turned out actually to work very well, and I really appreciate you planning a group project inside the summer school, because that proved, despite being virtual, we were able to connect and share ideas and brainstorm, and was really insightful and inspiring. It was my favorite part, definitely, of the entire summer school. And I really also enjoyed watching all of our projects, which were so different but also so connected. It was really inspiring, and I guess a silver lining of this pandemic is that we're all able to participate despite being in different countries, different time zones, and having a lot of other commitments. So thank you.
No one else?
We are the end. So
yeah, I guess we are at the end.
Batman and Robin will say hi, and well, I have to go because the alarm is on in 30 seconds. 29, 28, 27. Bye. Ciao. Thanks for all.
So thank you all. I guess now I can pass the ball back to Paolo, and Elena and Francesco will wrap up this nice moment, right?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, everybody. So, Paolo, how is that as a community building exercise? I think it worked. I think the school worked that way, right? And in fact, I have a couple of colleagues to also call in because they couldn't make it today, but Jurgita spoke in the end. Justina Urbonaite, I don't know if I pronounce her family name again, was with us. Francesco Vitucci, Valeria Reggi, and of course, Monica Notari, who helped us enormously through all the months with the recording and with the technical assistance and the content that she provided to the school, of course. And before I let the floor to Francesco, who will somehow conclude our ceremony, simple online first ceremony to celebrate our alumni, I want to tell you that, of course, your projects are still with us, and we will write about your projects in the next weeks with some ideas and some follow-ups for sure. But some of you have already received a little package, a little token from the WeTel with our fantastic gadgets, right? But the most important thing that you have in the bag, the beautiful red bag of WeTel that everybody wants, so it's going to worth a lot in a moment. There is this. Inside you have a very old medium, right, which is a postcard. And please, when you feel like, just drop a line to us in Bologna. And of course, the address, we will send an email with the correct address so you have no excuses. With an older thing that we used to call a stamp, I think you can still find a few of them here and there. It's called the postal office. I think they still exist. This kind of ancient institutions, right? So please do send a message to us, a comment, a poem, a line that can encapsulate your WeTel experience for us. So we will add those words to our memorabilia, because this is also a memento of you with us. And then next time you pass by Bologna, when it will be possible to meet in person, we will be we will have fun reading all the messages together and creating again a nice moment of our community. So the time runs fast, and I guess I thank you again, all my colleagues, all the students, Paolo for hosting this event, but the final words as far as the WeTel community goes are with Francesco.
Thank you, Elena. Just a few words. Thanks again to the students. We hope to meet you as soon as possible in Bologna to have some drink and food together. You are invited to do that. I think we will organize soon as possible, and hopefully also try to pay for your coming to Bologna, because you deserve that, just to meet each other, to really meet each other. I want to thank Paolo on behalf of the teaching community for his huge work as a director today. You are wonderful as usual. We know your attitudes with this. Again, Monica Notari, because she was some kind of Paolo Granata in Bologna. She was directing our interns and all the things you see, the website and so on. My colleagues, and of course, Elena, because she was actually to quote the round table King Arthur story, she was the prima inter pares. She was the one who created actually this school 3 years ago, but also before. Paolo Rondelli in this month used to call her, quoting Whitman, Captain, oh Captain. This is the truth. She just collected us as some sort of crew, a crew of stragglers, but she's the one who created this. So thank you, Elena. You were great as usual, and the school was possible because you created it, and we all know that. So this is not some sort of final words of circumstances, just. You have both friends with you. Thank you again. We are waiting for you in Bologna. I have my URL, but it's.
I wanted to bring back Julia, if she's there. Yes, all right, here we are.
Grande Giulia. Beautiful talk. Julia,
Yes,
you will
yes.
be back to Bologna as soon as possible, hopefully with our students. And by now, Julia, because of this talk, you are part of the WeTel community.
Sorry about that.
So I can't wait to come back to Bologna. I'm so sorry that we couldn't all be there together, but let's hope that we can
It
gather
will
again
happen
soon.
Okay. Thank you,
Excellent.
Paolo.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Bye.
Grazie.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Ciao.
Grazie.